are talking the 1987 movie White Phantom. This one is directed by Dusty Nelson, who also previously directed the other ninja movie Sakura Killers. And this one features J. Roberts Jr. as Willie, who was our kind of white ninja in question, and a supporting role by Bo Svenson. So this and Sakura Killers, although not directly kind of related as in their sequels, do actually take place within the same cinematic universe. So yes, this is a early example of a shared universe, with the Sakura Foundation being the kind of the bad guys within this movie, also featuring in the Sakura Killers. So what is the story? So it takes place in Asia. I think it's meant to be Japan, but we're going to come on to this because there's conflicting evidence to the contrary of that. But nonetheless, let's just say Asia for now. And we have this kind of criminal organisation, the Sakura Foundation, have acquired a kind of stash of plutonium. And they want to kind of obviously do the nefarious things with it. And they are kind of being investigated by the US government. And they're essentially like a kind of Yakuza, ninja sort of style clan, bad guys, organised crime, whatever you want to call it. They've also got the interest of the White Ninjas, which are this kind of rival ninja clan of which our kind of character Willie is a part of. And ultimately we have this kind of essentially investigation and kind of this Willie trying to figure out what's kind of going on and disrupt this criminal organisations and ultimately defeat the bad guys. Okay, so a reasonable amount to say about this film. Obviously the 80s were the heyday of the kind of the ninja fad that kind of swept the kind of like the video shelves of the time, and there is lots of examples of obviously ninja movies. I've reviewed a few here on the channel. This one, there was always one that I remember seeing in the kind of the video stores, and I always thought it was kind of inspired by Storm Shadow from the G.I.joe franchise, which kind of was around 1985, so it came a couple of years before this. And Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes were kind of two of the most kind of popular characters. So a white ninja, albeit obviously particularly an impractical kind of sort of colour in regards to kind of stealth and things like that, but nonetheless it's visually kind of quite striking. So yeah, I can't help but think this is somewhat kind of maybe influenced by sort of G.I.joe. But what can I talk about that works in this film? So this is obviously comes from an American director. He co-directed Sakura Killers, whilst this film he actually is in full control as well as writing it, and it definitely has more of a kind of a Western feel to it rather than kind of a martial arts film that kind of comes from Asia. And despite I think the impracticalities of having, you know, a white ninja outfit, and obviously how that is not going to help you in a stealthy situation, even though we see him trying to kind of like duck for cover and hide behind things, it still is visually quite striking, I have to say. Particularly the kind of the last kind of 10-15 minutes of the movie is where we really get our kind of our ninja action, and you know, we have this kind of face-off between the kind of the evil head of this kind of foundation, who of course is wearing his black traditional ninja garb there. But I've got to say, visually it was pretty striking. I've also got to say I think the end fight was quite good. You know, obviously again the kind of the choreography here is not you know, as you would expect, to the par of the kind of the stuff that was coming out of Asia, like the kind of the martial arts films actually coming out of China and Japan and all that. But nonetheless, I still think it's fairly good. And you know, there are a couple of sequences within the movie where are kind of visually quite interesting. I quite like the fact that this was actually filmed in Taiwan. We have some kind of quite unusual kind of architecture here and there, and I kind of quite like some of the kind of the location shooting was all pretty good. Our kind of central character of Willie is the kind of quintessential a stranger in a strange land, badass kind of American kind of stereotype that you got. You know, he's kind of unshaven, he's got kind of long hair, he plays a harmonica, you know, he's shooting hoops, all this kind of stuff. A bit of a kind of, you know, a loose end, obviously, knocking around with prostitutes and stuff like that. So he's kind of like a little bit of a rough around the edges character, which I kind of somewhat of a kind of appreciate, albeit it's kind of very kind of stereotypical and kind of actually makes him quite unlikable to a certain degree. But nonetheless, there was that. There are some quite funny scenes as well. We have a dance scene where we have a stripper dressed as a ninja, and it ultimately is she's a stripper at a kind of a nightclub and things like that, which was quite funny. And there are just one or two sequences that I quite enjoyed. But let's be honest with you, this is, I think, certainly one of the lesser movies of the kind of the ninja fad that sort of came out. As I've already mentioned, as visually striking as a kind of a ninja in kind of like a white kind of get up, it's quite visually arresting. It's massively impractical and kind of doesn't really make any logical sense. But then again, this movie doesn't make a lot of logical sense, and there's so many facets that I could kind of go down here. Number one, the plutonium that we see get kind of captured at the beginning of the movie, and I've got to say that sequence is the very first sequence of the movie. It's considering that there's plutonium in this kind of convoy. There's one guard who's lazily gets taken out while he's eating a sandwich. It's ridiculous. Why would you even need a kind of a bunch of ninja assassins? You could have a couple of guys, you know, in a car would be just as effective. It's ridiculous. So yeah, and then this plutonium is kind of like the driving force of the movie, and it just disappears. And it's mentioned a couple of times until about halfway through the movie, and then it kind of is never mentioned again, and we never see the resolution about where, you know, it being collected or anything like that. And then we kind of have to look at our main character, Willie, who is the kind of the white ninja. And, you know, what is he actually doing there? The movie never actually tells us. He's not working for the US government, because even though he is American, we see him interact with both Svenson's character, who is the kind of the official presence by the US government, and they don't know each other. They have nothing to do with each other. Thinking, who are you? And why are you actually here? There's one line of dialogue where we kind of are told that there's this white ninja clan who is the kind of almost like rival, and this kind of mystical you know, ninja kind of clan that is super kind of hardcore and everything, and but they're like very virtuous and everything, and that's kind of it. But we never really get any idea about the character of Willie, you know, what he's actually doing, how he got into this clan. Nothing. It's nothing. We have no idea what his actual kind of motivations are, other than he happens to kind of be there. And you know, obviously, this is a 1987 movie, so I don't think it would, you know, this day and age, this would be accused of being kind of like the great white saviour and all of this, and there it is. But obviously, 1987, no one kind of cared about that kind of stuff. As I mentioned, I think the fight scenes, although I quite enjoyed, certainly the last 15 minutes, they're not as kind of proficiently kind of shot as actual kind of you know, cinema that came out of kind of Asia. And again, let me just kind of go back to what I was saying about it being set in Asia. Obviously, ninjas are Japanese, and there is a lot of kind of Japanese culture within this kind of like this ninja camp and stuff like that. But the characters are speaking Chinese, and it was filmed in Taiwan, so it's kind of like, is this made for Western audiences who just kind of see like Asia and then don't ask any questions? You know. I'm assuming it must be, because it's kind of, again, it's like ninjas are not Chinese. You know, it's Mandarin spoken language, filmed in Taiwan, but about a Japanese ninja cult. Kind of weird. I mean, I guess that could happen, but I think there needed to have some sort of dialogue or, you know, explanation to that setup. I think the worst fact of this movie, though, is it's actually quite boring. We don't really get any proper ninja action until the last kind of 15 minutes. And the bulk of the film then is just this kind of Willie character, not in his ninja garb, just turning up in his kind of long trench coat, being an American and all that. And then no one kind of questioning why he's there or anything like that. Sort of turning up and seemingly just kind of asking questions as to what's going on, and reference this kind of Yakuza family. And let's talk about this Yakuza family, the Sakura Foundation, who, like I said, have connective tissue to the previous Sakura Killers movie. So we see them, you know, getting plutonium, stealing plutonium at the beginning of the movie. So that's quite heavy stuff. But the only other criminal thing that we see them do in the film is shaking down local businesses for protection money. Thinking, what? You know, it seems like a far cry from stealing plutonium to, you know, shaking down the local bookstore owner for protection money. It's kind of silly. And to be honest, the bulk of the movie is just kind of like long sequences like that. And, you know, we get a brief kind of like a couple of sequences with you know, some fight scenes, but they're kind of shot to save the good stuff to the end of the movie. So it's saving its actual kind of ninja fights towards the end of the movie. And then we get to that sort of scene and we have these, which is quite fun, I'll admit, in a B-movie kind of way. But obviously we just have these kind of guards walking around, the bad guy guards, who are just faceless kind of cannon fodder ultimately, in their kind of camo ninja. And I think if one of these had a gun, that would be the threat eliminated. But now they're kind of carrying swords and stuff, and it's just a little bit stupid, to be honest with you. So it is a very, very silly, schlocky movie. A couple of silly, enjoyable parts. But to be honest with you, it's mostly kind of boring, mostly kind of dull, with a character that we know nothing really about, so we can't really kind of get behind him because we don't know anything about him. There's kind of like this sort of hinted at romance, which doesn't really go anywhere, and it's kind of like the characters are so underdeveloped that we don't really care about them. And I suppose they were going for a stranger type kind of deal with Willie, but ultimately it kind of undermines his character, and ultimately we don't care because we don't really know who he is. He's just some guy. So it's a 3 out of 10 for me. A pretty poor movie with some kind of enjoyable scenes just kind of sprinkled in that you can kind of watch in a schlocky way. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.